Hugging kitties, wish you a happy new year. I just spent my first year as a free man after being wrongfully convicted and incarcerated for 23 years. Ask me anything. I'm Ricky Kid. In 1997, I was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for double homicide, a crime I didn't commit. I couldn't afford a lawyer, and the public defender I was assigned didn't have time or the resources to prove my innocence. I spent 23 years behind bars trying to prove the things my public defender should have found in the first place. In August of 2019, a judge ruled that I was innocent and released me. After I got out, I started IAmA Resilience, an organization that raises awareness about those who have been wrongly convicted. Last month, I got married, and, in December, we are expecting a baby daughter. And I'm Sean O'Brien, a law professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. With the help of UMKC clinical students and my co-counsel, signed D. Dodge, I represented Ricky for more than a decade, and eventually got him released last year. I've spent decades working to overturn wrongful convictions, especially for inmates on death row. Before that I was the chief public defender in Kansas City, Missouri, from 1985 through 1989. Do you hold any hatred/resentment toward the public defender that was unable to help you? Or have you put all that behind you? Ricky, good question. At first, I did. Many years ago I did, then I didn't, and now I do again. It's complicated. Understandably so. They took away the thing most precious of all, time. Have you been compensated by the state for wrongful imprisonment? Scene. Ricky has not been compensated. He has a team of lawyers working on that. Barry Sheck has taken his case, so stay tuned. His freedom was on the line. Public defender. Money is on the line. Team of lawyers. Shake my head. What is a realistic expectation of what compensation is possible for Ricky? Scene. What is realistic to expect for compensation? That's hard to answer. For most of my clients, the answer is $0 because of the doctrine of governmental immunity. Clients either get nothing or they get millions. Most get nothing. Anyone wrongfully imprisoned should be exempt from taxes for life. Their government failed them and doesn't deserve to benefit from their work. Congrats on winning your freedom back. I was wondering what was the first meal you had after release. I think I would have gobbled down the biggest steak I could find. Ricky, I did gobble down a steak, filet mignon, French fries and a cold beer. A fine meal for a fine man. Did you tell the other inmates you were innocent? Did they believe you? When I was a kid I lost recess for writing on someone's desk, and I didn't do it. I still think about that 25 years later. So I can't even begin to imagine your frustration. I'm glad to hear you're free. Ricky, another perfect IAmA question. I always challenge people to imagine being accused of doing something they actually didn't do, no matter how small it is. You get it. And I certainly did tell everybody I was innocent. Anybody with ears who would listen. A vast majority did not believe me, but the man on this session with me, Professor Sean O'Brien, did. The Honorable Judge Darren Adkins did as well, which has landed me on this stage with you. If someone finds themselves facing court with a public defender, do you think there's anything they can do to assist in their own defense? Scene. In Ricky's case, he made a good record by writing letters to his lawyer asking her to investigate his alibi and do other things for his defense. These letters were very important later. Hopefully you're okay with a personal question. Based on the timeline, it sounds like you got together with your now wife immediately after getting released. So how did you two meet? Or had the relationship already started to form while you were incarcerated? Ricky, this is a perfect IAmA question. Ask me anything. I actually met my wife in January of this year and the magic was there but initially ignored. We were working together for a period of time until the magic could no longer be ignored. After that, the rest was history. We got in an ASCA and raced around the track. Can you tell us more about what discovery led to your release and why it wasn't presented in the original trial? Scene. It was an accumulation of facts. Surprisingly, a confession by the real killer was not enough. An admission by the only eyewitness that he lied when he identified Ricky was not enough. It was finally the evidence of a deposition taken by Ricky's co-defendant of the real killers, the co-defendant's alibi witnesses, that had been hidden from Ricky's trial attorney. That evidence gave us a valid legal claim. Innocence by itself is not enough, believe it or not. What technological or societal development was the biggest surprise to you after getting out? I'm guessing it was the remote-controlled vibrator. Ricky, not for me. But you can add AirPods. Silly Ricky, AirPods go in your ears, not your tuchus. What is the biggest misconception about prison? Scene. That it rehabilitates. Ricky, that's easy. The biggest misconception is that most of society believes that everybody is guilty, when that simply is not the case by far. Another misconception is that everybody is ruthless and violent, and that is also not the case. What's the thing you're most looking forward to about becoming a parent? I'm so happy you are free to live your life. Ricky, the one thing I look forward to the most is being present after so many years of being absent. It is so important to have the experience of being present. I've been to every doctor's appointment, I've watched probably about 40 baby videos, and I'm already practicing my gaga, goo goo. What an absolute nightmare. Did you learn any new skills, good or bad, whilst you were inside? Ricky, a nightmare indeed. As for the new skills that I learned, patience would be at the top of that list. But I also learned basic computer skills. I also learned office skills in the job that I was placed in. I became a certified dog trainer. Aside from any job assignment, I also read over 1,000 books over the course of those 23 years that have helped me adjust better than some of my other exoneree friends. Scene. I'm assuming you hear a lot of incarcerated people tell you they're innocent and to get them out. What inspired you about Ricky's story? Scene. Ricky's case was brought to me by an investigator I know and trust, Dan Grothos, and when I looked into his case I realized that every single public defender to touch his case screwed up something fundamental and important. In the 1980s, I was in charge of the office that later defended Ricky, and it made me sad to see how far down the standard of performance had sunk, so I felt a responsibility to Ricky. Something needed to be done, and nobody else was stepping up to the plate. Did you ever give up on life when you realized that you maybe was gonna die in prison, or did you always kept hope even after a decade and more behind bars? Ricky, a mix of both. Out front and publicly, I kept a strong face. But at times, throughout the 23 years, I certainly was ready to give up and call it quits. I honestly believe in the fact that, because my legal team did not give up on me, it made me ultimately not give up on myself. One question I have is about your return to society. What was the most surprising to you in terms of how much the world has changed since you went in? I can't imagine the almost culture shock of it all. Is there anything you miss about being inside? Ricky, hands down, the technology. It took a minute to wrap my head around. The fact that a cell phone was basically a computer was mind-boggling. The fact that nobody was looking at each other, but instead looking at their phones when I went out was surprising. Haha. Took me a minute to catch up, but I'm just starting to get the hang of it. Anything I miss? Absolutely not. Do you think your time in prison has changed your personality? Do you feel like a totally different person now? Ricky, yes, and yes. Prison did change my personality. I took life for granted in my youth. Being wrongfully convicted caused me to sober up real quickly. Today I appreciate not just the big things in life, but the little things as well, and always encourage others to do as well without having to lose their freedom. What was the first thing you did after the time? What turned out to be very difficult after 2 decades in jail? Ricky, one of the first things I did was take a bath. In prison, there's only showers. What turned out very difficult for me after 2 decades in prison was relationships. I was used to being away from my family, and I was happy to be back around my family. But I wasn't as responsive as they would have hoped, or as I would have thought. Sometimes it just felt like I was still in jail when we were apart. I still struggle with this today. My question is, once you were proven innocent, did you face any hardships trying to get that record expunged? Especially on a personal level, were there still people from your life who still thought you were guilty? And what complications came with dealing with that? Are they going to reopen the case of the 2 murdered people? Ricky, as for the challenges of getting the record expunged, it took about 9 months for that actually happen. And my lawyers had to push the issue. So yes, I guess you could say it was frustrating. I never faced people thinking that I was still guilty, at least not in my case. I thought I would, but it didn't happen. I'm not sure if they'll reopen the case. It's been almost 25 years, and probably would be difficult to pursue charges. Scene. When you convict an innocent person, the evidence gets distorted. By prosecuting an innocent person, it distorts the evidence. That makes it difficult to pursue the real killer.